Hello to all our viewers. My name is Anshula. I'm an intern at Foundation for Democratic Reforms. Today I'm going to be in conversation with Dr. JP, particularly about the topic of language. Sir, to set the context, the Maharashtra government introduced a three language policy mandating Hindi as a compulsory third language in primary schools. Facing growing public anger, the government reversed the decision last month. On the 1st of July, a few people celebrating the state government's rollback of the three language policy beat up a shopkeeper for not speaking in Marathi. Similarly, the Karnataka government in June of this year issued a stringent directive. All government correspondence, memos, file notes, meeting agendas, even building nameplates must be in Kannada. Non compliant documents would be returned. We're seeing that language is increasingly becoming an issue in India, particularly in states such as Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Maharashtra. So, my first question to you would be, what is the role of language in fostering a sense of belonging versus exclusion amongst linguistic minorities?
Anshula, good evening. Language is a very natural barrier. There are many artificial barriers in human society. Religion, caste, region. These are all very artificial barriers we have created. They have no basis at all. Race probably has some basis because the genetic makeup certainly sometimes determines the physical features and a few other attributes. But language is a very natural barrier because what is human is communication. Human species is unique because we alone have learned the art of sophisticated communication beyond the very primitive kind of communication other animals also indulge in. We communicate our thoughts, we grasp ideas from others, we develop these ideas, we debate them. So, the moment human beings are not social, they're not able to communicate with each other effectively, they can no longer cooperate. They can no longer function as a society. Functioning as a collective is a unique attribute of human society. Therefore, language is a serious issue. It is a very naturally dividing issue. It's the umbilical cord with which you have communication with the rest of the society. There's no question about it. But having said that, in India, I think we have done a masterly job. You recounted some of the instances of friction and politicization, etc. But these are aberrations, Anshula. We are a country with 22 officially declared languages under the Constitution. We probably have hundreds of dialects. Considering that, I think we have done a remarkable job as a society and as a state. Take Britain. We all think of Britain as an English speaking country and the mother of English language and so on and so forth. But actually, England's English is different from, let's say, Scottish English. Ireland, it's almost like a different language. Welsh people actually speak a different language altogether. Welsh language is not the same as uh, English. And the total of United Kingdom has only about 64, 65 million population. They have so many linguistic diversities. Considering that for a 1.46 billion population with 22 officially declared languages, we have done a masterly job of integration in our country. The linguistic reorganization of states was a remarkable effort. It removed many impediments to national unity subsequently. So, if you compare with a country like Britain or UK, we can see how remarkably better managed our system is. You take a country like Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has only two languages, the Sinhala language, which is native, and the Tamil speaking people, a significant minority in Jaffna province. And because the country did not know how to handle these two languages, for 30 to 35 years there's been bloodshed, murder, mayhem, and tremendous decline of an otherwise beautiful country. Take a country like Belgium. Belgium essentially has two languages. A small, very small minority speak German, but basically it's the Flemish people speaking the Dutch language and the French speaking people. In Belgium, which is the seat of European Union, a very evolved country, very developed country with hyper capita income, very tiny country, they're not able to form a government. Every time elections are held, it will take a year or 2 years for a government to come together, a coherent government to be formed because of the linguistic differences. Now look at India. We have done a remarkable job. So while we must acknowledge the problems and figure out the solutions, we must not despair at all. Whether it's linguistic reorganization of states or the three language formula evolved long back, or the irrevocable ironclad guarantee that English will continue will continue as a linked language as long as the people of India want it, and Hindi will not be imposed on the country, and many other things which actually worked very well. So I think most of these problems that you recounted are not really major problems. I actually see a singular success in India in managing the linguistic diversity, unmatched linguistic diversity on planet Earth. And these are bound to be problems on occasion, partly because of cultural predilections, partly because of political polarization. Basically, it's about market segmentation. You talked about Maharashtra or Karnataka. It's basically some groups trying to find political relevance using language as a tool. It's not really a popular issue affecting the minds of the people at large. As long as the governments at the state and union level act with good sense, and I think on the whole they're acting with good sense. A few aberrations here and there apart. So I think we should take it seriously, but we should not be alarmed by it. I think we've done a great job of promoting linguistic harmony in a remarkably diverse society, and we should continue that job.
So you said that a few people are using language as a tool. Expanding on that a little bit, could you tell us what role do political parties play in shaping public discourse and action around issues such as language and culture? Would it be a stretch to say that such issues are being used as weapons in the political marketplace?
It is not a stretch at all. Absolutely, you're bang and target. Because non issues are very minor issues are projected as major issues. Under the 24-hour television and social media, using the megaphones, they gain in dominance in the mind space of the people. And ultimately, it does two things. One, a problem is created where there is none. And two, really important issues are relegated into insignificance to the cost of the society at large. And that's what's happening in these respects. Essentially, if you look deeper, what are the issues of language in a country like India? There are four issues. One is the governance and administration. You talked about the Karnataka government order saying that all government correspondence must be in the Kannada language. In my judgment, that's a perfectly reasonable proposition. Because if the language in courts or in governance and administration on a daily basis is not in the language that the people of the state speak, then you are alienating yourself. You are acting as a colonial master in an independent nation. That is different from polarization on grounds of language. If the state has one language, primarily one language, and after linguistic reorganization of states, most of the people speak in that language. Absolutely, it is reasonable to say that correspondence and government work and the court work should be in that language, at the trial court level at least. Constitutional courts, you may use English also. It does not mean that other languages will not be given due role when they are necessary. Like, for instance, in the Telangana state, Urdu is the second official language because there's a significant Urdu speaking population. Similarly, in other states, some other language may be also significant, and that also can be given important place. But if you take out that administration and governance issues, there are three issues that matter to us on a daily basis. The first is at school level, the medium of instruction. We confuse between mother tongue and medium of instruction. What should be an academic issue, we try and make it a cultural issue and therefore a political issue. Medium of instruction should be seen as an academic issue. What matters is that does the child understand what she's being taught at school? There is undeniable, conclusive evidence world over, and not today, for about 100, 200 years. Mahatma Gandhi, way back in 1915, in a seminal speech in Benares, he made this point way back in 1915, 120 years ago, 110 years ago. So there's nothing new about it. A child in the first years of learning must be taught in a language that she understands. Whether it's mother tongue or not is immaterial. If you speak habitually in English at home and you are comfortable with that language, you know what is spoken, you can communicate well, then English is your language. If that's what you choose and your family chooses. But otherwise, for most people, it is what we call the mother tongue, that is the language of discourse on a daily basis. And by imposing an alien language in early childhood as a medium of instruction, thinking that somehow English will give a better advantage, we're actually undermining the child's intellectual capacity in the future. The child cannot fulfill her potential because if you don't understand what is being spoken, how can you develop your mind? Let us just think, you and I are discussing. Let us say a global expert on this subject is interacting with us, and we have a conversation with him. He is an acknowledged global expert, a great scholar. But he's speaking in a language that you and I don't understand. Let's say he's speaking in Chinese or Portuguese. Now, all that interaction is irrelevant to us, right? No matter how educated you are, no matter how learned we think we are simply babes. We have no understanding of what the other person is speaking. So language is about communication. In the so-called English medium schools for the non-English speaking kids, what is happening is a non-English knowing teacher is pretending to teach non-English knowing kids in English. So medium of instruction is not about the culture or linguistic identity. It's about the child's ability to comprehend, to learn, to acquire the skills and knowledge. Once we understand that, a lot of problems disappear. The second is language, mandatory learning of language. If medium of instruction is decided on the basis of what we discussed, the academic requirement, then in a multilingual country, what other language should the child learn? I think it's universally accepted in India that a child will be better off if she learns English. Even if it's not a medium of instruction, I think it's the aspiration of almost every parent and every family in this country. There's generally no serious disagreement on that. And I think given the global conditions and India's comparative advantage in terms of language, that's a wise policy to continue with learning English. But if somebody says, I will not learn English, I don't think we can force beyond a point. But chances are that most of the people would like to learn English. Then the third language issue. For long, once the three language formula was evolved decades ago, it was broadly accepted that the local language, English, and Hindi, they will be the three languages. For instance, we at school in Andhra Pradesh were taught also a bit of Hindi. I don't think we really learned great Hindi. Telugu was taken very seriously. That's a medium of instruction, as was the language. English was taken reasonably seriously because proficiency in English was important. It was understood to be important. But Hindi, you just have to pass the examination. You get a smattering of knowledge, some minimal vocabulary, and oftentimes we're confused about grammar because Hindi has this difficulty of gender. There's no neutral gender. Everything is masculine and feminine. And for people who grew up in South India, it's very difficult to understand which is masculine, which is feminine among inanimate objects. But we did learn a little bit. The syntax, a bit of vocabulary, and some grammar. And it was easy to pass. They didn't make it very tough to pass. At least some familiarity, some acquaintance with the language. It worked reasonably well. There's no serious problem. In the current condition, I think if you take the local language and in a government school funded by the state's exchequer, it's reasonable to say you must learn this language, the local language. And if you take English, the third language, you can make it either Hindi if there's consensus, or you can say any other Indian language of your choice. There's nothing wrong. Or if they don't want to learn an Indian language, let them learn some other language if they so choose. I really don't see any serious difficulty. We're manufacturing a problem where there is none. All that matters is what are the kids learning? Are they actually learning? The challenge of India is not in which language the kids are learning. The challenge of India is kids are not learning anything at all in most cases. Time and again, government reports and then non-profit organizations' reports and surveys, they reveal that the learning levels are appallingly bad in India. That is the real challenge. Then the third issue is migration. You have need for migration. All citizens of India enjoy equal rights across the country. We all have fundamental rights of residence, establishing a business, or practicing a profession, or being employed anywhere in the country. There's no discrimination constitutionally. That's what nationhood is about. But that apart, practical requirements, economic imperatives demand that we give space to all languages. Now, you have some states where the demographic dividend is no longer felt because the population actually is declining or is stagnant. And the working age population, as a proportion of the total population, is declining, and there's aging of population. But economy requires more and more workers, younger people, working age people. Therefore, people from other parts of the country who are willing and able to work will migrate. And migration is the source of wealth creation. It's a way of fulfilling your needs locally. If you cut off yourself from migration, you're actually the loser. Now, if migration is required, then migration must be made hospitable. You must give space to their language. Similarly, the migrants must learn the local language in order to be able to be economic players locally. So we are creating artificial problems when there is none. People from Bihar migrate. People from Orissa used to migrate. Now I think not so much because Orissa also is now in the declining curve of population. And we need those workers in other parts of the country. Unless you respect the language of the migrants and unless the migrants are willing to learn for their own economic gain, both sides will lose out. So you mentioned, for instance, the case of Maharashtra, where some hostile and violent action is taken against people who don't speak Marathi. First of all, they would be unwise not to learn Marathi. If you work in Maharashtra, it is in your interest to actually learn Marathi for your own sake. And second of all, the Maharashtrians would be unwise to discriminate against people who don't speak Marathi. As long as they provide a valuable service and contribute to the economy and pay taxes locally, they're actually an asset. You must make it welcome for them. And to insist on learning a language when those language skills are not required for the day-to-day occupation. Some occupations don't require local language skills. That's actually an act of chauvinism. It's an act of discrimination. It's an act of hostility that undermines migration and therefore that imperils future economic growth of your own region. So these political parties are not acting in the interest of the people of the state or the region. They are trying to get a political dividend in the short term at the cost of the state's long-term interests and, of course, the nation's long-term interests. We should not blow them out of proportion. People of India have abundant common sense. Even in states like Tamil Nadu, where there was a lot of hostility towards Hindi, Hindi is increasingly popular. When Tamils go to the rest of the country, if they want to participate in economic activity in the rest of the country, the market situation demands that they understand a bit of Hindi. When non-Tamils go to Tamil Nadu to work, because a lot of migrants are required in Tamil Nadu and Kerala and states like that where the population is aging, then they have to learn the local language in order to do well. And of course, our Hindi films are doing a marvelous job. Hindi or Telugu or Tamil, the films are doing a marvelous job of removing the uh, linguistic differences. Now, who doesn't enjoy a Amitabh Bachchan movie or a Shah Rukh Khan movie or a Rajinikanth movie or a Chiranjeevi starrer? So, ordinary people have an abundant common sense. They don't take these issues very seriously. And India has done, let me reiterate, a remarkable job, an almost unprecedented job. Actually, we are a model For multilingual countries, India is a model. How to manage the linguistic differences, linguistic diversity, harmoniously. India is almost a remarkable model. And our political system and politicians and the legislatures have done an incredible job. We keep complaining and criticizing them quite rightly when they deserve that criticism. But in general, in handling our diversity of language, I think our parties and our governments over the past 70, 80 years have done a remarkable job. And I'm sure they'll continue to do that job. And there'll be some aberrations here and there. But these are minor aberrations, short term aberrations. I don't think it'll affect the country. It's a great success. We must not extract defeat from the jaws of victory.
That was very well said, sir. Picking up where you left off, do you see the promotion of Hindi as a tool for majoritarianism, as some critics allege, or as a legitimate effort to build national unity, as Hindutva idealists claim? Do you think the North South divide is growing further in increasingly desperate measures being taken to unite them?
I don't think North South divide is growing further. There was a time when people north of the Vindhyas had very little understanding of the South. They used to dub all the southern states as one, Madarasis. I remember during our training way back in 1980 at the National Academy of Missouri, a colleague civil servant from the IAS, I'm specifying IAS because it's supposed to be an all India service, wedded to the unity of the country, the steel frame of India. A colleague civil servant from the state of Uttar Pradesh, he was allocated to the state of Uttar Pradesh, and he came from Uttar Pradesh. He asked me, what's the language spoken in Andhra Pradesh? I was hurt. But now, everybody in the country knows the languages, at least of the major states, because the political conditions have changed. The monopoly of power of a certain region or a party has disappeared. And significant personalities emerged all over the country to capture the imagination of the rest of the country. For instance, NTR's emergence in Andhra Pradesh gave identity, apart from changes in politics in the country and the state, it also gave identity to Telugu language and culture. So today, if anything, we are more integrated, more respectful of linguistic differences, linguistic identities. Similarly, economy also is now much more integrated. Earlier, we created artificial barriers. We had license permit quota Raj. There was no genuine competition. There was no choice. There was no national common market. And barriers were created for reasons of corruption and incompetence. Whereas today, with the GST, with economic growth, with liberalization, with competition, with choice, there is one common market in India. Increasingly, it's becoming more and more unified market. And once we have unified market, the economic necessities compel you to interact with each other. And therefore, people happily interact. So I think on the whole, India is actually getting more united in terms of language, more harmonious, not less harmonious. There are other fractures, the demographic fractures, because we have frozen our parliamentary constituencies for about 50 years now. And in these 50 years, there's a differential growth of population in different states. The birth rates are somewhat different. And the fertility rates, the number of children a woman bears during her reproductive life, that number is different. Though it's all declining all over the country, in all groups, in all languages, in all regions, there is still some variation. So some states continue to grow in terms of population. Some states actually have reached a level of stagnation. Some states are on the verge of actually declining population. And therefore, there are some distortions in political representation. Now, it's a complex political challenge. I'm sure we'll deal with that. Similarly, in a country with enormous regional diversity, some states have very high per capita income. Telangana has very high per capita income. Goa has very high per capita income. Some states are still relatively very poor. Bihar is still only at one-fourth or so level of the rest of India in terms of per capita income. Now, once that such enormous differences are there, how do you handle the federal allocation of resources, the devolution of funds to states? Now, if you say uniform to everybody, you're perpetuating inequalities among regions and actually dampening economic growth. But if you say everything will only go to some states, other states feel we are paying taxes but you're not getting commensurate benefits. So somewhere a balance had to be struck between the needs of improving the regional economies where they're lagging, and reasonable sense of equity and political consensus in a federal democracy. And I think India is good at that. Our finance commission has done a marvelous job over the years, and it's getting better and better. And we'll continue to argue, debate, discuss, or even in a family, when there's a division of properties, of parents or inheritance, there are sometimes disputes, right? It doesn't mean there's no love. It doesn't mean they're not members of the family. It doesn't mean that they don't share the genes. So in a country as diverse as India, there are going to be some fissures, some friction. We must not overplay them. We must not exaggerate their importance. We must look at it in the larger frame, in perspective, and we should look at the long-term frame also. India has done a remarkable job of improving its federalism. We are perhaps the only significant country after the Second World War that created a new federation and made it more and more mature and more successful. 40 years ago, federalism was sham, mostly. For a variety of reasons, it was highly centralized. Today, our federalism is real. The destiny of the people is now dependent on the states, not on the union government. In a substantial measure, the governments in the state are in charge of the destiny of the state. So I think we're getting more harmonious, more federal, and yes, there are going to be frictions, but we should not exaggerate them. We should not get discouraged by them.
Right, sir. Circling back to the economic activity bit, um given a trend of language based discrimination in culturally diverse hubs such as Mumbai or Bengaluru, what do you think are the long term implications of such violence on economic activity and mobility? Do you think other states can capitalize on this and attract better talent?
Absolutely. See, the reason why Mumbai became so important is historically, being on the west coast, being used to trade and commerce with the Gulf countries and Europe, it was cosmopolitan. It was inviting, encouraging of all cultures, languages, regions, and religions. So people felt at home. But if you become insular, if you're not hospitable, then you lose the economic advantage. Bombay was preeminent earlier, 30, 40 years ago. If you talked of Indian economy or Indian urbanization, Bombay was inevitably number one, the most important one. Today, truthfully, it's no longer true. I love Mumbai city, but it's no longer true. Mumbai is no longer dominant. Actually, if you notice, the national capital region, comprising of Delhi and surrounding areas, is now economically the most vibrant region. Why? It is the most cosmopolitan region. It's the most inviting for the whole of India. The best talent is migrating. The best intellectual capital is migrating. And the best investment is coming. Job creation is happening. Similarly, earlier, other cities of India, apart from Delhi and Mumbai, were also ran cities. You take Bengaluru, you take Chennai, you take Hyderabad. But today, they are vibrant centers of economic growth. Bengaluru is now on the global map to the point that the congestion in Bengaluru is now bothering everybody. The traffic congestion and paralysis and so on and so forth. Hyderabad is a very vibrant city. So the more cosmopolitan you are, the more likely you are to invite or to encourage migration of the people of real competence and skills, of capital, of investment, of job creation, and therefore of economic growth and incomes. So the cities that are losing out on account of political differences or parochialism, narrow-mindedness, they will ultimately lose out economically, and therefore there'll be pressure. Mumbai cannot survive without migrant labor. Let's be truthful. I don't know if many people notice when they talk about the states which are containing the population growth well, losing out in terms of parliamentary representation. That is one of the complaints, right? You also refer to that indirectly. Now, Maharashtra is actually going to gain seats, not because of natural growth of population through birth rates, but because of migration, mostly in Mumbai city. Delhi Union Territory is going to gain significant number of seats, not because of natural birth rates, but because of migration. So migration gives you not only economic clout, but also political heft. And if you lose migration, you lose money, you lose talent, you lose investment, you lose market, and you lose political advantage. And I think local people are smart enough to understand, even if there are short term departures from this trend, eventually people understand that economy cannot run without migration, and political clout will not come without adequate uh, tax paying, productive people migrating to your region or your city or your state. So I'm not unduly alarmed, but yes, we must check these excesses early on, not merely by law and by brute force, but by persuasion, by logic, the kind of discussion that we have, by looking at things in perspective, understanding what is the benefit, what is the loss to us locally. Once the collective self-interest people understand locally, they will put a stop to these tendencies to exaggerate the differences on account of language and culture.
Right, sir. I want to zoom out a little bit right now, and I want to ask, for economic reasons and to ensure that India has a better global footing, do you think English would be a better choice? So, the context behind which I'm asking this question is that the Russians, the Chinese, the French, they all speak their respective languages on the global stage. Similarly, do you think India's multilingual identity would not be comparable, and there's no metric to choose one language over the other?
Anshula, that ship has sailed. Ideally, our own languages must grow to be global languages in terms of commerce, in terms of communication, in terms of science and technology, in terms of management, and of course, in terms of culture. But that ship has sailed. For whatever reason, because of colonial hangover, because of a fascination with English as a medium of instruction, because of we're multilingual, therefore we preferred a tongue which is not native rather than accepting any one of our own languages. Whatever be the reason, English now seems to be the preferred option for most families and most children. Two, because of the dominance of English language as a language of global discourse, global communication, global science and technology, and global economic interaction, there's an advantage if you're proficient in English. Now, given that, I would say a threefold approach is required. First, about the language of instruction at school, medium of instruction. We discussed it earlier. It has to be based on academic requirement rather than your cultural imposition. The child must be taught in a language that she understands at least the first 4 or 5 years of schooling. Without that, the child will not be productive. Child will not acquire the skills. Child will not be an effective economic player. I have no doubt in my mind. To that extent, it must be mandatory. The child must be taught in a language that she understands. It's common sense proposition. It's not a cultural or political proposition. It's a learning proposition. Two, the advantage that we have by way of learning English, and because we are fascinated by English language, must continue. So teach English as a language. And depending on the level of learning, there'll be varying degrees of proficiency. But let's not lose the edge that we have. Global edge on account of English as a language. Continue that. Three, simultaneously, a conscious effort must be made by the scholars, by the governments, and by the society to build up our languages. If our languages means always going back to the literature of 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, the epics and the prabandhas, as they call, and it's not really growing to meet the requirements of modern society, then that will not help. Take Telugu, we still talk about the 16th or 17th century um, poetry, or 11th or 12th century poetry of Mahabharata being translated, or the 16th and 17th century poetry of Vijayanagara Empire or Ashtadaggaja or whatever. All that's necessary. That's all beautiful. But unless you make the language grow in terms of vocabulary, in terms of communication, in terms of translating the concepts into local language, making it local, genuine, we are elbowed out of the modern society. English language has grown phenomenally. It borrowed thousands of words from other languages. There are probably hundreds of words that you and I can easily recognize from Indian languages in English. So if you quest for Puritanism in language, classicism in language precludes your possibility of growth, then you're yourself to blame. We must embrace the words and embrace the idiom to suit the modern requirement. I grew up in a Telugu medium school, in a Telugu speaking family. But after a certain age, thanks to my teachers, I acquired some reasonable degree of proficiency in English and I started not only reading and writing but thinking in English. So today I think in English. So English is now, so to speak, my natural language. It doesn't mean that I'm not proficient in Telugu, but more often than not, I find myself translating from English into Telugu while I'm speaking. Now, I'm not the poorer on account of that. Supposing Telugu language has the same richness of vocabulary, has developed an idiom to suit the requirements of acquisition of knowledge in modern era, science and technology, humanities, conceptual understanding of many things, then we'll be much richer. So we must grow our languages, local languages, not only on the basis of the traditional classical poetry and grammar and so on and so forth, but we must actually make them grow in a modern sense, to make them relevant to modern scholarship, research, science and technology, and communication. Then I think in the long term we can protect our languages. But you cannot artificially protect them without making the languages grow. And that means the scholars, the pundits, the teachers, the society at large, apart from the government, they have a lot of role to play.
Right, sir. Uh, Now, my final question is one that I think wraps up our discussion quite well today. How do you think we can balance the need for a common language for national integration with the right to linguistic self determination?
First of all, the common language, don't overemphasize that. Let sleeping dogs lie. Something has worked for 80 years, right? For 70, 80 years now. Despite all the linguistic differences, we're able to manage. The union government is able to communicate with the states are able to communicate with the union government. The people know what the governments are saying or doing. So let's not upset the apple cart too much. While obviously, when 40-45% of the people of India speak Hindi, though actually there's no one Hindi, there are many Hindis from Braj Bhasha to Bhojpuri to Awadhi to something else. But we call it all one Hindi or Hindi, Hindustani or whatever. But there are other languages. As long as that is the case, I think the basic consensus we have evolved that we will not impose any one language on the people of any state in this country as a national language. If you speak Hindi because the largest minority speak Hindi in the country, it's convenient, it's perfectly okay. But if you prefer to use English as a language of communication and administration in addition to your local language, so be it. That is the consensus we evolved in the country. In parliament, in legislatures, in courts, that's the consensus involved in the country. Let's not upset the apple cart. Let that tradition continue. And make language an instrument of convenience rather than a cultural tool. Primarily look at it as a communication tool. What is language about? Language is about communicating, interacting. I should know what you are thinking and speaking. And you should know what I'm thinking and speaking. Then only we can learn from each other and we can collaborate, we can cooperate. That is the primary purpose of language. The rest is all additional purposes. So don't undermine the primary purpose of language in order to focus on the cultural aspects of language. And culture never dies. No, the fears that culture will die must be given up. I also used to worry. What will happen to our culture? People are not embracing language. They're not learning local languages. They're focused on English. They're half baked. They know neither English nor the local language well. What is going to happen? Now, somebody told me very wisely long ago, don't worry too much about culture. If one person imbibes the culture and transmits to next generation, the culture is alive. Whether it's classical dance or music or your own wonderful literature, classical literature, or poetry, or grammar, or syntax, or alankara, as we call, whatever it is. If one person is alive, if that one person transmits to next generation, culture is alive. So I'm not unduly worried about it. Yes, we should do whatever we can to promote it, propagate it, to nurture it. But we should not panic. There's no reason for panic at all. Ultimately, all knowledge is universal. We as human beings are heirs of all knowledge. And let's not shrink ourselves, even as we protect our own identity, our own culture. We are fiercely proud of our language. People in the United States, for instance, of Indian origin, they protect their language a great deal. Now, just because they came to an English speaking country, an alien country, and in many ways an alien religion, alien skin color, that didn't make a difference. They're able to preserve their identities. If anything, the people in the West of Indian origin, they're preserving our classical arts and our language better than in India. So it is a myth to believe that if you embrace another language, if you become more and more modern or urbanized, your culture will die. It's not true. We have living examples.
Right, sir. That's all from me today, sir. Thank you so much for taking out the time and speaking to me. Um,
Thank you, Anshula.